Hello everyone and welcome back. We are in day 11 of this advanced Mule training. So in earlier video, you understood how to use Okta as identity provider. If you have not watched it, please go and watch so that you'll get clear idea about Okta. And now I'm going to explain you about how to secure your APIs using OAuth policy. And there's a topic here, explain how to secure APIs on any point platform using API Manager. I have already covered this in my developer course. So if you go to my channel ZeroToSiva, under playlists, you have a playlist. This is my Mule developer playlist. And if you go to day 27, the last day, I have discussed clearly about API management. There are 4 videos. Very good. I have clearly explained how API management works. So if you have not seen these videos in my Mule developer course, I request you to go through this and understand how API management works. In this video, I'm just going to concentrate on how to configure OAuth policy or how to secure your APIs using OAuth policy. So what am I going to do? Let me tell you step by step. In my GitHub, I have already created one RAML and my RAML is available in my GitHub. I'm going to download that zip file. I will show you my GitHub location so that you can also do the same thing, whatever I am doing. So I will download the RAML, which I have already created, and import it to Design Center. OK. I don't want to create the API again. I have created the same API in my developer course. If you want to know how to create RAML API specification, you can go there. So I'm going to import this zip file into Design Center. Assume that my design phase is done. I'm going to publish it to Exchange. And from Exchange, I'm going to publish it to public portal also so that anybody can view my API. Then I'm going to implement this RAML, of course, using Studio. And I'm going to deploy my application on Cloud Hub. So as you might be knowing, on Cloud Hub, whenever I deploy my application, Cloud Hub is going to create a virtual machine on Amazon. And inside this, Mule runtime will be started. And inside this, my application will be running. OK. I'm sorry. Before that, actually, what I'm going to do before I deploy, let me delete this. After developing in Studio, to manage this API, we need an API ID if I want to go with auto discovery. If you don't know what is auto discovery, please see my videos on API management, day 27 of my developer course. OK, so I need API ID in my application to enable auto discovery. So what I will do is I'll go to API Manager and create an API pointing to Exchange. Once I create an API pointing to the one in Exchange, I will get a unique API instance ID. I will use this instance ID in the application and enable auto discovery. And then I'm going to deploy my application on Cloud Hub, wherever, even you can deploy it on your standalone as well. Whenever I deploy, assume that this is the VM in Cloud Hub and Mule runtime will be started. Inside Mule runtime, my application will be deployed. Inside Mule runtime, the agent will also be running, as you know. Agent will register this implementation with API Manager using the API ID. So API manager knows about my implementation running here. Okay, now if any client is actually hitting this API, the client will get the response because we have not yet secured. Now in API manager, I'm going to configure OAuth policy so that if any client is making a request, the OAuth policy will check if there is a token and if the token is valid or not. Okay. Of course, if I want to secure my APIs using OAuth, I need an authorization server. I am going to use Okta as my authorization server. Okay. So I will show you entire process, how I'm going to register my an application with Okta so that I can get the client ID and secret. I will configure a scope called as restaurant scope on the Okta. And then while securing my API, while configuring security policy, OAuth policy, I will configure such that any request which is coming to this implementation must have a token, and the token must have a scope called as restaurant. Now, if any request is coming from the client has to send token. How can the client get the token? Of course, client needs to hit the Okta token endpoint, get the token, and this token, whatever it is getting, must contain a restaurant scope. Then if, of course, Okta will send the JWT token, right? So if this JWT token is sent while making a request, the OAuth policy will be able to validate the JWT because this policy should be configured with public key of Okta. So while configuring the policy, I will configure what is the endpoint at which we can get the public certificate, right? Public key, right? So my policy will have the public key. It will be valid. It will be able to validate the incoming token and will check if the token contains the required scope or not. Okay, confusing? I will implement it step by step, right? I will make some errors. I'll make you visualize the information about scopes, everything step by step, right? It is going to be a little bit bigger video, but just watch it until the end so that you will get full confidence. And also one more thing is, initially in this video, I'm going to consume the secured API using Postman as a client. And in my next video, I will show you how to consume a secure REST API using HTTP request component in Mule. How you can configure OAuth related details in the HTTP request configuration. I will clearly tell you, don't skip anything. Patiently watch through this video step by step. Okay, so actually, I have my API in GitHub. Actually, I have created this API and it is available on this GitHub URL. You can also hit this URL and watch my API. And there's a branch. There are a lot of branches. There is a last branch, 10th branch, which contains all the API related files. So I'll just have to download this. Okay, then it is downloaded. Now I will go to my AnyPoint platform and import it into my design center. Okay, so actually I'll go to design center. In my design center already this API is there. because I have used it earlier. So to show you everything from scratch, I will delete this API. Good. Now I'll click on create import API. I will give a name. I'll give a different name now. My restaurant SAPI. Okay. In downloads, here it is. I will import. So it will be imported into my design center. Okay. On the right side, you'll be able to see the documentation. There are a lot of endpoints. We are not interested in all of them. I want to hit get request to /restaurants/restaurant ID. Okay, anyways, I have this in my design center. Assume that I have designed it right now. So I'm going to publish it to Exchange. I will take the default asset version and API version, publish it. Okay, published. Now, if I go to Exchange, this is the API which I published. This one was the old one. This is the one which I published right now. And I'm going to share this on the public portal. Okay, I'm done. Now, I'm going to implement the API using Studio. So I have it already. Let me delete it freshly. I'll create. Yeah. So one thing actually is before we go ahead, since I want to actually create an application for an API in Exchange, I have to give my Anypoint platform credentials. So I'll go to Window Preferences and I'll go to Anypoint platform authentication here. And I have to add the authentication for my user ID. So right now, my user ID is ZeroToSiva4. This is the user ID. This is the login. So I have to configure. I have to sign in with ZeroToSiva4 and give my password. Fine. So now my Anypoint platform, my Anypoint Studio knows about my platform authentication. And also one more thing, in API Manager, you have to give the client ID and secret of your environment where you are going to deploy. This is also very important. I'll go to again my Anypoint platform, access management, and under business groups, this is the organization actually into which I'm going to deploy. And under this, you can see there are multiple environments, design and sandbox. And for this organization, this is the client ID and secret. I have to configure the client ID and secret of my organization where I'm going to deploy. This is mandatory. I will actually tell you why it is required in the later scenario. If this is not there, what is the problem you are going to get? I will tell you. So the environment credentials are validated. Fine. Now I'm going to create a new Mule project. I'll name it as my restaurant SAPI IMPL. Then I want to import my published API from Exchange. Now see here, it is actually logged in as my username, and I'll search for my. Yeah, this is my API, my restaurants SAPI add. Finish. So this will actually generate an implementation, as you might be knowing. I will not go through it again. Let it actually generate the default implementations for all the flows. So implementation will be generated for all the endpoints. If you see, there is something called as /restaurants/restaurant ID. I want to concentrate on it. Here by default, a transform message is actually giving how a restaurant will look like based on my ramble. So assume that I have done the implementation. I'm not doing the implementation. Assume that I have done the implementation. Even in this case, if I give a get request to /restaurants/restaurant ID, I'm going to get this response, dummy response. Assume that I have done the implementation. Let me test without any policies. So I'm deploying it locally just for testing it locally. Let it start. Let me give a request and see what will happen. OK, it got deployed. Now I'll go to localhost 8081/API/restaurants. See, I am getting the response. So assume that this deploy implementation is done. Now, before I deploy my application to runtime, I need to configure auto discovery, right? So I need to create an application, an API in Apimanager and get the API ID to enable auto configuration. If you don't know how API auto discovery works, please have a look at my video in my developer course, day 27. Okay, so I expect that you know API auto discovery, how to enable it. So now what I'll do is I will actually go to API manager. Here it is. And already there is some API. I actually wanted to go and delete it. OK. And I'm going to create a new API. I will select, I don't want to use Flex Gateway. I will select Mule Gateway. And to use auto discovery, as you know, I have to connect to an existing application using auto discovery. I'll select this option. And I'm using Mule for next. Which API? This is the API in Exchange for which I want to manage. I'll take all the defaults. Downstream URL, this is not mandatory, it is optional. I'll take next, finish. So I have created an API in API Manager. I am going fastly on this configuration because I'm expecting that you know API auto discovery already. Again, I'm saying if you don't know or don't understand API auto discovery, please go and have a look at my developer videos in my channel ZeroToSiva. OK, so I've got this API instance ID. I'll copy this. Then going to my application, global elements. To enable auto discovery, I'm selecting API auto discovery here. I have to give the API ID and select the main flow. So in my application, auto discovery is enabled. Now I want to deploy this into Cloud Hub. So I'll right click here, Anypoint Platform, deploy to Cloud Hub. Fine. Now I'm deploying this application. I will select Cloud Hub 1.0. And if you see here, properties, don't you think that Anypoint Studio has added client ID and secret of my environment? Yes. Actually, if my application needs to contact API manager, it needs a unique client ID and secret of my environment. This needs to be configured. So that is the reason why I configured client ID and secret in Anypoint Studio at the start. It will automatically add this whenever I'm talking to API, whenever I'm deploying my application. Fine, I will deploy the application. I've taken all the defaults. Let it be deployed. It will take some time. I'll pause the video and I will resume once it is deployed. Okay, it's actually still deploying to Cloud Hub. I'll just close the window and see that in my runtime manager. I will keep on seeing the logs. Yes, it is starting the worker at this IP. I'll wait for a few more minutes for it to get deployed. Okay, yes, I can see that my application got deployed on Cloud Hub. So actually, what will happen once my application is deployed on Cloud Hub? It is running inside a Mule runtime here, right? The agent, what it will do, it will connect to API manager using the client ID and secret. It will actually communicate with API manager, and agent actually will identify that in this application auto discovery is enabled. It will get the API instance ID, and using that instance ID, it will send the information to API manager, and API manager will register this application implementation. Now let us go to API manager. I should see that it is active right now. Okay, API manager. Yes, you can see that this my restaurants API is active. When will this API status be active? Once the agent uses the API ID to send information to API manager, then only the API will become active. Now it is active. Fine. Now let us go to runtime manager. I'll open runtime manager in a separate window. I want to actually get the URL to hit the API, this application. I'll try to hit the API without any policy right now. So go to here. I will replace this localhost 8081 with this URL and let us see. Hey, I got the same response. So I'm able to access the API without any policies. Now I will go to API manager and see. I'll show you how I'm going to configure the policies. So I have to click on add policies. Now under security, you can see there is a policy called as JWT validation. It says all the calls to the API must include JSON web token to use the API, right? So I am going to configure this JWT validation policy. Next. Actually, this requires a lot of information. One of the most important thing is the JWKS. JWKS. What is this? Okay, let me tell you what actually it is. So where will this policy be implemented? Once I apply the policy related files will be downloaded onto policies folder on the runtime, right? So whenever request is coming, the policy logic will be executed. What the policy logic should do? It should first of all validate the token. Token is a JWT token. As you know, it contains A.B.C. C is nothing but signature of the Okta server. So first of all, if the policy has to validate this token, that means it needs to validate or verify the signature. This policy needs the public key of Okta. How to get the public key of Okta? Actually, there is a URL called as JWKS URL, JSON Web Key Set. Okay, JSON Web Key Set. JWKS stands for JSON Web Key Set. So at this URL, normally authorization servers, if I hit this URL, it will give me the information about the keys. Right, I will actually show you. I need to get this JWKS URL of my Okta and configure it here so that whenever a request is coming with a token, in the token signature is there. To validate the signature, public key of Okta is required. So this policy will actually get the public key by hitting the JWKS URL, right? So now I will go to configuration of my Okta. I will actually go to developer.okta.com and I have to log in. OK, I will log in with my existing ID. I will log in with my Google. I've logged into my Okta. Actually, in my earlier video, I have shown you how I have created an Okta account and all. If not, please see my earlier video where I told how to integrate Anypoint platform with Okta. I configured Okta as an identity provider. In that, I have shown you how I have created this Okta account. OK, right now, this application who wants to access my API needs to get a token, right? What kind of grant type do you think will be good? Client credentials. This is application and this is another application. Application to application means client credentials. So my application, this client application should be registered with Okta as a client. Then it will get the client ID and secret. So let us see how this client application can register with Okta. OK, so I'll go to the Okta login page. I logged in and here I need to register my application. So I'll go to applications and create app integration. It is OpenID Connect. OK, then it is I'll configure it as a web application. OK, and in that I will select client credentials. Next, I can give the app name, my client app. I'll just give any name and I want client credentials. Of course, as I selected a web application, by default, it will take authorization code. So I'm saying this client also can use client credentials grant type. And when it is client credentials grant type, this sign in URLs, sign out URLs are not actually used. If you are actually creating for both authorization code as well, then you need this. But in this case, I'm going to use this application for client credentials grant type. So I will ignore all this. Now, allow everyone within the organization. I'll just say, or otherwise, I can actually limit access to a selected user group. Right now, I just allow everyone in this organization. So, anyways, so I created my client app. Here I have got client ID and secret. Fine. Now I'll go to servers. Security API. Actually, let me deactivate this. Actually, by default, there is an authorization server. Right. I want to create my own authorization server. Let me delete this. OK, by default, this is default authorization server in Okta. I want to create my own authorization server with specific things. So I'll click on create Siva auth server. I just give and audience. I can give API : restaurant API audience. OK, I'll just give something and some description, this same thing. So API : // This is the way I'm giving. I can give anything. Same. Now this will create an authorization server. It is active. Now I want to define a scope specific to my Siva authorization server. Add a scope. I'll give restaurant torrent API scope. This is my custom scope, which my API expects. Okay, so we can give the same thing for all. And this is an implicit because this is not a scope given to any user. This is for app to app. It has to be implicit. Okay, create. So I configured scope. Okay, so where is it? Here it is, restaurant API scope. Fine. Now in the settings, you can see this is the metadata URI. Okay, where is it? Oh, this is a metadata URI. I'll just open it in a new link. So here you can get the server specific URLs like what is the authorization endpoint, token endpoint, etc. Okay. Now, access policies. If you see there are no access policies, I'll click on add. I'll give ZeroToSiva access policy. Now, do you want this policy to be for all clients or to the following clients? What is my client name? It is starting with yeah, my client app, is it? Yeah, I think this app which I gave. So this policy, this server should be used only for this particular client app. Okay, or I can specify all clients can use this. Let me specify all clients can use this server. Description, okay, some description will give. Create a policy. Fine. So all clients who satisfies this criteria can use this server. Fine. Now let us see, go back to applications and try to get a token. This is a client application, my client app. I'll try to get a token using Postman. Okay. So this is the API I'm going to hit. I'll go to authorization, select OAuth2, and then I want to configure get a token using client credentials. And what is the access token URI? So here, if you see the server metadata, this is the token endpoint to get a token. So I'll copy this and paste it here. Fine. And then I need to get the client ID and secret of the app. Client ID I'll copy. Paste. And then client secret I'll copy and paste. Then what is the scope for which I need to give a scope? Actually, my application needs a scope. What is the scope I gave? I'll go to security API for this server. What is the scope name? Restaurant API scope. I'll give this as a scope. Now get a token. Authentication failed. What is that? Let me see in the console. Policy evaluation failed for this request. Please check the policy configurations. Okay, this is some error. Let us try to understand. For this Siva Auth server access policies, this policy rule, add a rule. Oh, for this policy, all clients add a rule. Sorry, I forgot to add a rule. Rule name, something. I will write a rule in this policy. This rule will be applied to any clients using client credentials grant type or any grants. I'm just giving all the defaults here. Okay. The access token lifetime. I can define everything in the rule. So create a rule. Okay. So under auth server, under policies, I am saying if any client is actually trying to get a token, this client, it is any client who is satisfying this rule using any of this grant types. When I configured, now let me go to Postman and try to get a token. Succeeded, proceed. This is the token generated. I'll go to jwt.io. Let us see the token actually. So once I pasted, you can see this is the payload. Is there a scope called as restaurant API scope granted for this token? Yes. Okay. Now we understood how to get a token. I need to configure OAuth policy in API manager. Okay. So let me check. I'll add a new API is already there. For this, I need to configure a policy. Selected policies, add a policy. Under security, there is JWT validation token policy. So what is the JWT origin in the client request where you want the JWT token? I want it in HTTP bearer authentication header. What is the signing method? JWT signing method, RSA. What is the signing key length? 256. I will take the defaults. Now here it is asking me for the JWT key origin. It is asking for JWKS. Okay. From where to get JWKS? I'll go to my Okta server. See, this is my, if I actually go to a security API, it will show Siva auth server, which I created. For this, actually, this is the metadata URI. I'll open this. Here, let us see, is there something called as JWKS token? Yeah, here there is something called as JWKS URI. I'll copy this URL and try to hit it. Oh, it is showing something like keys. It is telling what is a key used for signature, right? So keys. Algorithm is RS256. Usage is for signature. This is a key used for verifying the signature. So actually, this, where is it? This JWKS URI, I need to give to the policy while I'm configuring the policy. So the policy will be able to get the signature keys from here. And for others, I will take all the defaults. Right now, there is one thing called as skip client ID validation. Actually, by default, this policy will try to get the client ID from the token by using this expression. Right now, I don't want to validate the client ID. And you can validate the audience. Who is the audience? Actually, if you see this token, who is the audience for this API colon? Yes. If you want to validate that the audience is the same as expected, in your policy, you can configure validate audience claim, right? And you have to give what is the audience claim values, right? There are a lot of other things you can validate in the token. So right now I'm skipping client validation and I'm validating the audience claim. This is the audience. So if the token belongs to this audience, then only the policy will allow. Fine. Apply. This policy is applied successfully. Now let me try to hit the API. What is the API actually? Yeah, this is the one. I'll hit without authentication. Am I getting the response? Yes. Oh, I applied the policy. Why am I getting the response? As you know, it will take some time for the policies to get applied. So I just have to go to the logs of my application and verify whether the policy has been applied successfully or not. Oh, I got an error. What is it saying? Malformed URL. No protocol definition. Oh. So is not a valid JWKS URL, it is saying. No protocol. Here I give protocol, right? Okay. Well, copying, I think I copied double quote as well. Okay, maybe I will go to this API policies. I will edit the policy. I guess I copied unnecessary double quote. Yeah, see, small mistake. Good, no problem. I will save it now. The policy will get applied automatically. Let me go and check in the logs. After some time, this logs will get updated. Yes, applied policy, right? Now I got this log. Now let me try to hit this API without the token. It is saying JWT token required. Now to send the token through Postman, I'll select OAuth2 and here I need to configure the Postman to get the token. So if I come down, I can give a name to the token, my token. What grant type? I want to use client credentials grant type. And I have configured already, right? This token URLs and all. I'll get a new access token. It will get the token, proceed. It is saying this is the token, use this token. Okay, token added. Now, if you see the headers, you can see that authorization header has been added and the value is bearer : this is the token. Now send it. So I got access. Okay. Now let me go to the policy in the API manager. I will edit the policy and here I'll just change the expected audience claim value. Okay, so save. Now let us wait until the policy gets applied with changes. Yeah, actually, in the UI, I guess it is not showing the updated policy log. That's okay. Now, if I actually give a request, it is saying invalid token because the audience claim is not satisfied. So now we understood how to actually configure OAuth policy on the API manager side. In the next lecture, I'm going to show you how to consume an API which is already secured using OAuth. See you next lecture.